I always thought betrayal would come like a thunderclap, loud, unmistakable, final. But in truth, it came softly, like the rustle of paper sliding from a purse. That morning, I was folding laundry when I found it. A receipt curled at the bottom of Greg's jacket pocket. The edges were warm with body heat, still crisp. Beverly Jewelers, the name read, scrolled in gold across the top. My stomach turned before I even read the item line. 114K white gold necklace with diamond drop pendant. 12,176.85. It wasn't. For me, I hadn't worn jewelry in months. My old silver chain sat tarnished in the tray by the bathroom mirror, forgotten, like so many parts of myself. He hadn't gifted me anything in years, not since the first anniversary. When I brought it up, jokingly, softly, he told me I wasn't the kind of woman who needed things to be happy. He used to say that like it was a compliment. I stood there, holding that slip of paper, the scent of his cologne still lingering in the jacket's lining. That scent, Santal Reserve, warm and smoky, had once made me feel safe. I used to breathe it in while lying against his chest, thinking I had arrived at some permanent kind of peace. Now it made my skin crawl. I didn't plan to confront him. Not really. But when he came home and tossed his keys into the bowl by the door, the words came out before I could stop them. "Who's it for, Greg?" He paused, mid-step. "What?" I held out the receipt. For a moment, just one beat, his eyes registered surprise. Then nothing. A blankness. The kind you might wear when deciding how to end a business call. "Oh. That." He shrugged off his coat like it was just another Tuesday. "It's for a client. Retirement gift." "A diamond necklace?" He didn't answer right. Away. Just walked past me, the scent of Santal Reserve trailing behind like a ghost. "Why are you going through my things anyway?" "You left it in your jacket," I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. It practically fell into my hand. "So now you're spying on me?" His tone sharpened, like I was the one on trial. "You know how paranoid you sound?" I wanted to scream. Instead, I followed him to the kitchen. The walls felt smaller than usual, like the house itself was retreating from the fight. "I'm pregnant," I blurted. He froze, glass halfway to the faucet. 6 weeks. I hadn't planned to tell him yet. I hadn't even planned to keep it, if I'm honest with myself. I wasn't sure I could raise a child in a marriage that had turned into something so cold. He set the glass down slowly. "You're what?" "Pregnant. I found out a few days ago." I watched him closely, searching for something. Hope, softness, even fear. Anything human. What I saw instead was calculation. "This isn't a good time for us to be making changes," he said carefully. "You know things have been tense." "Because you're cheating," I snapped. A pause. His jaw clenched. "You don't know anything." And then it happened. Not with a shout, not with a lunge. Just a fast, cruel movement, his palm against my shoulder. A shove meant to push me out of the way. Except my heel caught the edge of the rug. The fall wasn't loud. It was quiet, almost graceful in its violence. The world tilted. Hardwood stairs met bone. I remember the dull thud of my elbow, the sharp scream of my hip, and then my head hit something, and everything blinked out for a second. I came to at the bottom, air knocked clean out of my lungs. The light from the hallway chandelier spun above me like a slow carousel. My cheek was pressed against the floor. The taste of iron coated my mouth. There was a wetness between my legs I didn't want to name. He didn't run down. He didn't shout my name. I heard his footsteps upstairs, pacing, pausing, a door closing. I lay there for a long time, unsure what hurt more, the pain in my body, or the chasm opening inside me. I pressed a hand to my belly. I hadn't wanted to love this baby yet, hadn't even picked out names. But lying there, bleeding, I felt something slip from me that I hadn't realized I was holding on to. A thread of hope. He came down eventually, stood at the top of the stairs, looking down like I was something he might have tripped over. "You should be more careful," he said. I didn't answer. Couldn't. After he left, where I don't know, I pulled myself up slowly. My body trembled like glass. I didn't cry. Not yet. I made it to the bedroom, then the bathroom, cleaned the blood from my thighs with shaking hands, looked in the mirror and didn't recognize my reflection. There was a photo of us on the vanity. Me, in that green silk dress, him in his navy suit, smiling like he owned the world. I stared at it, then turned it face down. I didn't call 911. I didn't call my sister or a friend or even my old OBGYN. Instead, I picked up my phone and opened a browser. One-way ticket. Anywhere. Just go. That's what the voice in my head whispered. The one I hadn't heard in years. The one that used to belong to me. I booked a flight before I could change my mind. As I lay in bed that night, bruised and aching, I wrapped a towel around my midsection like armor. Not to protect the baby. I knew, deep down, that life was already gone. But to hold together the pieces of myself that hadn't yet shattered. And in the dark, I made a silent vow. You will not get the last word. You will not erase me. I'm not gone. Not yet. The first time I saw Greg, he was standing under a canopy of string lights at a friend's engagement party, laughing like the world had never told him no. His suit was tailored, navy blue, and slightly rumpled at the collar, just enough to make him seem human, approachable. He had that smile, the kind that makes you feel like you're the only person in the room. And for a while, I was 31, teaching high school literature in a district that paid more in guilt than in salary. I lived alone in a rent-controlled apartment where the heater rattled and the walls smelled faintly of old books and garlic from the neighbors' cooking. My life was small, but mine. Greg made it feel too small. You're meant for more, he told me on our third date, tracing the rim of my wine glass with his finger. You have that quiet brilliance, like you were built for something better than grading essays written by kids who don't even care. I remember flushing at the compliment. It felt like being discovered, like a locked part of me had been cracked open and kissed by sunlight. He was 5 years older, owned a small real estate firm, and made things sound easy. Investments, mortgages, futures. Security, he used to say, isn't a privilege. It's a choice. When he said it, I believed him. I started to crave his presence like oxygen. The way he looked at me made me feel chosen. 6 months in, I moved in with him. Gave up. The little apartment with the peeling blue door. He said the commute was too long, that it made more sense to live with him. Why pay 2 rents? He asked, brushing my hair back like I was a child. You trust me, right? That phrase became a fixture in our conversations. You trust me, right? It slipped between other things, almost invisible, between spoonfuls of dinner and kisses on my forehead. I didn't realize then how much weight that question carried, or how often it would silence my instincts. I left my teaching job a few months later. He said he missed me during the day, that the stress of the classroom was changing me. I just want you to feel taken care of, he whispered, hands on my shoulders. You've worked hard your whole life. Let me carry it now. It sounded like love. It even felt like it. At first, I painted. I read. I planted a garden. But then the days stretched. The hours between sunrise and his return became heavy and quiet. He stopped asking about my books. He started complaining about mess if I left a mug in the sink. My thoughts shrank to fit the size of his expectations. He kept everything. In his name, our joint bank account, he said, would muddy the taxes. The house title? Cleaner if it's in one name in case of a lawsuit or audit. Even when we adopted a dog, a gentle spaniel named Olive, her records were filed under his. You worry too much. He'd laugh when I questioned it. It's all ours anyway. What's mine is yours. But I began to feel like a guest in my own life. I stopped seeing my friends as much. He didn't forbid it, not exactly. But he'd make remarks, sarcastic little barbs, about their single status or lack of ambition. You're different from them, he'd say. You've outgrown that. One night, my best friend Lena pulled me aside at a dinner party. He's isolating you, she said quietly, wine sloshing in her glass. You don't see it now, but there's something off about the way he watches you. Like he's waiting for you to say the wrong thing. I laughed it off. Told her she didn't understand Greg. That he was intense, yes, but devoted. That passion sometimes looks messy. And hadn't we all wanted a man who would really care? Truth is, I didn't want to examine the parts of me that already knew she was right. That would mean admitting I'd traded my independence for comfort dressed as love. Still, cracks formed. He'd text constantly when I was out. Where are you? When will you be home? Who's with you? If I didn't reply within minutes, I'd be met with silence when I returned. Or worse, a tense monologue about how inconsiderate I was. But he always ended with, I only get like this because I love you too much. That's the thing about manipulation. It doesn't come with warning, signs. It comes gift-wrapped in guilt and affection. You don't know you're being buried until your breath shortens and your world dims. I started having dreams about drowning, of reaching the surface and being pulled under by invisible hands. Still, I stayed, because some days were golden. He'd bring home flowers. He'd kiss my wrist while I made tea. We'd lie in bed and talk about baby names. Mara if it was a girl, Caleb if it was a boy. He said he liked names with history. I thought that meant he saw a future. The day I found out about the affair, he was in the shower. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. I never checked it, not once. But that morning, something inside me stirred. Some sliver of the woman I used to be reached forward and picked it up. The message read, Last night was heaven. Can't wait until you're mine for real. I remember standing there, blinking at the screen, the steam from the bathroom fogging the air between me and everything I thought was true. He came out of the shower, towel wrapped around his waist, and smiled at me, that same magnetic grin from the engagement party. Like he could still conjure magic with it. And for the first time, I saw it for what it was. A performance. I didn't confront him that day. I just stared at him as he dressed, kissed my cheek, and walked out the door with Santal Reserve trailing, behind him like poison in the air. That evening, I set the dining table for two like I always did, folded the napkins, lit the candle. But everything felt like theater now, like I was playing a part I never auditioned for in a show I didn't agree to star in. He told me once that real estate is about illusion. Make a place feel like home, and people will pay anything. Wonder now if I was just another property to him, a house with good bones, easy to renovate, easier to own. There's a certain kind of silence that lives in hospital rooms at night. It's not peace, it's vacuum. A cold, sucking stillness that makes you feel like time has stopped just for you, so you can fully absorb the worst moment of your life. Remember staring at the IV bag, willing the slow drip to speed up, as if I could pump the pain out of me fast enough to leave before reality caught up. But reality was already there, kneeling beside me, whispering things I didn't want to hear. The nurse was kind. She held my hand after the ultrasound tech left the room, her eyes glassy, but trained into professional calm. I'm so sorry, she said softly, almost a whisper. There's no heartbeat. I nodded once. I didn't cry. Not then. Not when she squeezed my hand, or when she asked if I needed someone to call. I lied and said my husband was on his way. Greg wasn't on his way. Greg hadn't even answered the first call. Or the second. He sent a text. 4 words. I'm in a meeting. That was all. When he finally showed up the next morning, he didn't bring warmth or apologies. Just a vase of white lilies I couldn't smell. My nose was too stuffed from crying the night before, alone. And white lilies? Funereal. I don't think he realized, or maybe he did, that they were the flowers people bring when someone dies. He set them on the side table like a placeholder for actual care. I'm sorry, he said, sitting stiff in the visitor's chair, avoiding my eyes. I panicked that night. I didn't mean to push you. Push. That word sat like ice in my stomach. He didn't deny it, just minimized it, like he'd knocked over a glass of wine, not his own pregnant wife. When I looked at him, really looked, I didn't see the man I'd built a life with. I saw strategy, calculation, a man already spinning the narrative in his favor. It was an accident, he added, softer now. But you need to be careful what you say. You're upset, understandably. But people don't respond well to unstable behavior. Unstable. The syllables hit harder than the stare. That word was a trap, a seed he was planting in case I spoke the truth. I felt it burrow deep, blooming poison. I lost the baby, Greg. I know. His voice didn't crack. It's tragic. But talking about the pregnancy, it would just complicate things now. It's better if we focus on moving forward. He left not long after. No lingering kiss on the forehead, no hand-holding. Just a pat on the blanket like I was a child tucked in after a tantrum. I stayed another day in that sterile room. The discharge papers listed me as stable. What a cruel word. I didn't feel stable. I felt hollowed out, like someone had scooped my insides out with a spoon and left me smiling to prove I was fine. When I got back to his house, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Olive was gone. Her food bowls, her bed, vanished. I searched the backyard, called her name, panic rising like heat. Then I found a note taped to the fridge. Took Olive to stay with my sister. You need rest. No stress. No stress. As if her absence wouldn't split me open further. I reached for my phone to call someone. Lena maybe, or even just a rideshare to escape. But the line was dead. My plan had been disconnected. I tried logging into our shared bank account. Locked. Incorrect credentials. I clicked forgot password. The reset link never came. I thought maybe it was a glitch. It wasn't. I grabbed my spare key and drove to the bank. The teller, a young woman with a nervous smile, looked at me with practiced sympathy. I'm sorry, ma'am. Your name is no longer listed on this account. What? That's not possible. It's our joint account. She typed a few more things, lowered her voice. I think it was converted to a private business account. Yesterday, while I was still bleeding in a hospital bed. I don't remember the drive home, just the sound of the turn signal ticking. Just my hands, clenched around the steering wheel, white-knuckled and trembling. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked smaller somehow, like a dollhouse with the back peeled open, every detail visible and false. I walked up the porch, heart pounding, and slid the key into the front door. It didn't turn. I tried again. It didn't turn. I knocked. Footsteps. Then the door creaked open. And there she was, a younger woman, maybe late 20s, perfect skin, blown out hair, wearing my robe, the one Greg bought me from Italy on our 3rd anniversary. Recognition hit me like a slap. I'd seen her before, at the company barbecue. She'd laughed too loudly at his jokes, her hand on his shoulder too long. I thought I was being paranoid. I'd even felt guilty for assuming anything. She blinked. "Oh, hi? Is Greg here?" She tilted her head like I'd asked something strange. "He's not home right now. Can I help you?" "I live here." Beat past. Her eyes flicked behind her, then back to me. "I don't think that's, accurate anymore." I walked away before I could say something ugly. Before I could collapse on that porch and beg someone, anyone, to tell me this wasn't real. I drove to a motel 2 towns over, the kind with buzzing neon signs and rooms that smelled like bleach and old cigarettes. I paid in cash, $37.89, the last of what I had in my wallet. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the tiny floral notepad the motel had left on the dresser. I hadn't written anything in months, but now my hand reached, almost on its own. I tore a sheet and began to write. Not a list, not a letter. Just this. He thinks this is the end of me. He has no idea who I am without him, but I'm about to find out. The pen shook in my hand. The tears came hard and fast. But I didn't stop writing, page after page. Rage poured out of me, grief, shame, and beneath all of it, somewhere deeper, something new, something small, something strong, a pilot light flickering back to life in the dark. It turns out you don't need a destination when you're running for your life, just the conviction to keep moving. I boarded a Greyhound bus with a backpack that held only what I could carry. A journal, 2 changes of clothes, the locket Mai. Mother gave me at 17, and the hospital discharge papers I couldn't bring myself to throw away. The bus hissed and moaned as it pulled away from the station, and with it, the last of my old life peeled away. No one chased me. Greg didn't call. Maybe he thought I'd go quietly, like an embarrassment to be managed. Or maybe he hoped I wouldn't survive. I didn't know where I was going. I just watched the landscape blur. Cities dissolving into forests, forests giving way to ocean. It was the sea that finally made me stop. 3 states away, in a coastal town too small to be on most maps, I stepped off the bus and inhaled briny air that felt like baptism. The sky was bruised with the threat of rain. The wind curled through, my hair, whispering nothing and everything at once. I walked until my legs trembled, until I found the faded sign, "Room for rent, inquire within." It hung crooked in the window of a pale blue cottage framed in lavender bushes. Marianne opened the door. She was older, maybe in her late 60s, with laugh lines that hadn't quite faded, and a voice like chamomile tea, warm, soft, slightly floral. She looked me up and down, saw everything in a glance. The haunted eyes, the thin wallet, the silence I carried. She didn't ask questions, just handed me a brass key and said, "The upstairs room is yours, if you don't mind helping with the garden." It felt like kindness without strings. I almost didn't trust it, but I was too tired to question grace. I slept for 2 days. Woke up with the ocean murmuring just beyond the window. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel afraid of waking up. The days began to take shape in gentle rituals. Morning, tea in chipped porcelain cups, kneeling in dirt alongside Marianne, pruning rose bushes and inhaling the earthy perfume of life beginning again. She told me she used to be a florist. Her husband died 7 years ago. "Grief is a strange bedfellow," she said once. "It curls up with you even when you lock the door." I didn't respond. I couldn't yet. But her presence was steady, a lighthouse in fog. She didn't try to fix me. She just let me be. I found under-the-table work at a second-hand bookstore nestled between a surf shop and a bakery that always smelled like cinnamon. The owner, Ruth, wore reading glasses on a beaded chain and hummed old jazz while she dusted. She didn't mind my quietness. She liked my careful hands. I swept the floors, restocked paperbacks, alphabetized shelves. Each task was small and grounding, like stitching myself back together. When no customers were around, I read books I used to assign in class: Jane Eyre, Beloved, The Bell Jar, stories about women clawing their way through darkness. I'd once lectured about their themes with detached confidence. Now, I felt them in my bones. One afternoon, I pulled a worn copy of Wide Sargasso Sea from the shelf and opened it. A line caught me, sharp and bright as glass. There is always the other side. Always. I closed the book and stared at my reflection in the glass of the window. The woman looking back wasn't whole yet, but she was different, sharper, a flicker of someone I hadn't seen in years. I began writing again. Not just scraps in my journal, but full essays. At first it was just grief poured onto the page, then came rage, then clarity. I wrote about control and silence, about losing yourself in love so completely you forget your own name. I wrote about the baby, never naming them, but describing the ache as honestly as I could bear. The kind of ache that has no sound, just a space. The local librarian, a man named Theo, with kind eyes and terrible posture, noticed me one day sketching in the margins of a poetry anthology. He asked if I'd ever considered submitting my writing. I laughed bitterly and said no. He handed me a flyer for a local literary journal anyway. "Just in case," he said. That night, I printed one of my essays and walked it to the little red mailbox at the edge of the garden. I stood there for a long moment before I let it go. It felt like mailing a piece of my skin. Vulnerable, exposed. But I did it. And when the envelope slid into darkness, I felt lighter. Time softened. I stopped, counting days. I'd walk the beach in the early mornings, barefoot in the cold sand, letting the ocean rinse through my toes like absolution. Sometimes I cried. Sometimes I just breathed. Once I found a piece of sea glass, rounded, pale green. It reminded me of the ring Greg gave me when he proposed. That ring had once been my favorite thing. I used to twist it around my finger during lectures, touch it like a talisman of safety. But now I saw it for what it was, a symbol of ownership, not devotion. I passed a small jewelry store one afternoon, its window filled with bright things. One ring caught my eye, a vintage setting, delicate and shimmering, so similar to mine. I stared at it for a long time, my hand ghosted toward the door. Then I turned and kept walking. I still dreamed of him sometimes. Not Greg as he was, but Greg as he pretended to be. His hand in mine at the vineyard where he proposed. The hotel room in Barcelona, his laugh echoing, against white tile. But the dreams would always twist. His face would morph. His hands would tighten. I'd wake up with my chest heaving, fingers clutched around the locket at my neck. Marianne never asked what the nightmares were about. She just left tea outside my door in the mornings, chamomile with honey, a soft note. "You're safe here." That note became a bookmark in my journal, a small truth I read again and again until I could believe it. I still had scars. The physical ones faded, mostly. The emotional ones did not. I didn't want them to. They were proof I survived. Sometimes I'd think about that last lie Greg told me, the one he wrapped in white lilies and legal threats. The lie that I was unstable, broken. But standing there on the shore, wind in my hair, salt on my skin, I realized something. I wasn't broken. I had been buried beneath his control, his charm, his voice always louder than mine. But now, I was digging myself out. One word, one walk, one breath at a time. Power doesn't arrive like lightning. It trickles in quietly, slowly, like light filtering through cracks in a boarded-up room. Months passed. The woman Greg broke was gone. Or rather, she had been reshaped, reformed, welded back together with fire and silence and salt air. I still lived in Marianne's upstairs room, still worked in the bookstore, though Ruth had started letting me rearrange the displays and recommend titles to customers. She called me her right hand, and something about that made me proud. But what truly changed everything was the day I saw my name in print. One of the essays I'd mailed off in a midnight act of blind hope was published. The journal sent a copy with a letter that said simply, "Your voice is necessary. Thank you for trusting us." I held the magazine in my hands for hours, kept rereading the first line of my piece. Sometimes survival looks like disappearance. It wasn't just mine anymore. My story was out in the world, carving space for itself. Soon, more essays followed. Anonymous blogs reprinted my words. Women left comments that mirrored my own pain back to me. Grief, rage, rebirth. It connected us, quietly and completely. Then the email came. Her name was Natalie, and she was a lawyer. "I read your essay," she wrote. "I think you may have grounds for legal action. Emotional abuse, financial coercion, maybe more. I'm offering pro bono representation if you're ready." The message sat in my inbox for 3 days before I responded. Not because I wasn't ready, but because I realized for the first time that I wanted to be. Natalie was sharp, warm, and relentless. She never flinched when I showed her the evidence. Marianne helped me dig it out. Hospital records, old voicemails, screenshots of texts that once made me question my sanity. My hands trembled as I gathered it, but Natalie's steadiness held me upright. Even after everything, I'd been afraid that no one would believe me, that the gaslight had burned too long, too bright. But Natalie did believe me, and that changed everything. I began taking self-defense classes at a local rec center. The first day, I was the only woman over 30, and the only one who didn't want to make small talk. I showed up in an old hoodie and sweatpants, wary and tight-lipped. But the instructor, a woman named Rena, understood something without me needing to say it. She didn't teach me how to punch to impress. She taught me how to get away, how to stand taller, how to say no with my entire body. "You're not small," she said one day, placing her palm against my shoulder. "You were just folded." Those words stitched into me like armor. Symbolic change followed. I removed my wedding ring, finally, fully. I hadn't worn it for months, but I'd kept it in the drawer beside my bed, like a relic from a past life. One windy afternoon, I took it with me to the shore. There was a tide pool I'd discovered, tucked between 2 outcroppings of rock. In it, seaweed swayed like secrets, and tiny hermit crabs scurried over barnacled stone. I crouched there and dropped the ring into the cold water, watched it disappear beneath the shifting surface. It didn't feel dramatic. It felt honest, like exhaling for the first time. I didn't need to carry him anymore. I bought a new coat. That might sound trivial, but to me, it was sacred. I picked it out myself. Deep green wool, fitted with wide lapels and pockets that could hold both my keys and my courage. For years, Greg had dressed me like a paper doll. Soft pinks, tight waistlines, jewelry that whispered, "trophy." But this coat? It said I was my own, that I didn't need to be anyone's anything ever again. I wore it out of the shop and never looked back. I also cut my hair. Not dramatically, but enough. Enough that when I caught my reflection in a store window, I didn't flinch. I looked lighter, smarter, sharpened by survival. Later that day, I asked Marianne to take a picture of me. I was standing in the garden, the green coat against the late autumn roses, my mouth caught mid-laugh. When I looked at the photo later, I saw it. Joy. Not just the absence of pain, but actual, real joy. It felt like holding proof that I'd survived. Began volunteering at a local women's center. At first, I just made coffee, handed out pamphlets, helped tidy chairs after group meetings. I didn't speak much, but one night, the group leader asked if anyone had anything they wanted to share. My hands shook, my breath caught, but I stood, and I spoke. My voice didn't tremble the way I thought it would. It sounded low, deliberate, unapologetic. I told them what Greg had done, not just the cheating or the lies, but the erosion, the vanishing of self. The way he'd taken my voice and convinced me it was a kindness. Afterward, 3 women hugged me. One whispered, "You said what I never could." Another night, I read from one of my essays. I watched as women nodded, teared up, reached for each other's hands. I was no longer just surviving. I was witnessing. I was creating language for things we were taught not to name. Greg never saw this version of me. He never met the woman who slept peacefully at night because she no longer had to explain her pain. He didn't know about the ring in the tide pool, the coat, the essays. The nights spent reading by candlelight, my journal open and unafraid. He wouldn't recognize my smile now, how it curled up, steady and self-made. And that was the best part. He didn't break me. He forged me. Not out of love, not even out of cruelty, but out of the space where his shadow used to be. Revenge isn't always fire and spectacle. Sometimes it's quiet, measured, precise. Sometimes it's writing your own ending and signing it with your whole name. I didn't want to destroy him. That was too easy. I wanted to become untouchable. I came back to the city the way fog rolls in. Quiet, slow, unnoticed at first. It had been just over a year. I returned not with vengeance in my heart, but with a file folder in my bag thick with truth. Bank statements, photos, medical records, voicemails I had once been too afraid to listen to again, and the letter from Natalie, now officially my attorney, confirming the court date. We didn't alert Greg. He'd receive his summons soon enough. I checked into a hotel downtown. Neutral space, quiet hallways, a window that faced east. Each morning, I rose early, watched the sunrise stretch fingers of peach and gold across the skyline. I sipped tea in silence, meditated, wrote. It wasn't anger that steadied me now. It was clarity. Cold, clean, sharp. Court began on a Thursday, chilly, gray-skied. I wore the green coat, the one with the deep pockets and the quiet strength stitched into its seams. When Greg walked into the courtroom, he didn't recognize me at first. His eyes scanned the room, dismissive, expectant. But then they landed on me, and something in his face twitched, just slightly. His jaw stiffened. His brows drew together. It was the smallest flicker, but I saw it. He knew. I didn't lower my gaze. I didn't flinch. He looked older, more tired, thinner somehow. The shine he'd always worn like a tailored suit had dulled, maybe from guilt, maybe from exposure. But I no longer cared why. He wasn't a god anymore, just a man, a liar in a pressed shirt, a stranger I used to know. The courtroom was small, intimate, no jury, just a judge, some observers, and the hum of fluorescent lights. Natalie spoke with the poise of someone who knew how to wield facts like scalpels. She laid out the story plainly. Emotional abuse, financial coercion, attempted harm, neglect following a traumatic fall that resulted in a lost pregnancy. She referenced bank transfers, hospital records, digital communication logs. And then, I testified, I took a deep breath before walking up. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to remember the moment. The feel of the floor under my shoes. The way my heart didn't race this time, they asked me to state my name. "My name is Elena Grace Holloway," I said. My voice didn't shake. I spoke for almost 2 hours. I told them about the gaslighting, the isolation. The day he called me unstable and froze my accounts. The night I realized my key no longer worked. The miscarriage, the lilies, the motel, the final note in my journal. I held nothing back. No detail too small. No pain too delicate to expose. Each word was a brick in the structure of truth. And by the end, I stood inside a fortress he couldn't breach. The turning point came when his mistress testified. She'd been discarded just like me. A woman 10 years younger, once introduced to me at a company barbecue as an intern with promise. Her name was Tessa. She wore no makeup, no jewelry. Her voice was brittle but steady. She confirmed everything. That he'd lied to both of us. That he'd used money and threats to control her. That she'd seen the bruises on me, faint, yellowed, but never said anything because she was afraid. When she finished, she sat beside me. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Her eyes glistened. I placed my hand over hers. "It's over," I whispered back. The evidence sealed it. A voicemail where he threatened to ruin my reputation if I made things messy. A spreadsheet of his hidden transactions. The hospital. Note from my fall. Patient reports accident, but mechanism of injury inconsistent with account. It was all there. All of it. And he sat silently, sweating, his tie loosened now, his lawyer's arguments sounding thinner by the minute. When it ended, the judge called for sentencing at a later date, but the findings were clear. Financial abuse, coercive control, reckless endangerment. He wouldn't walk away untouched. I wouldn't either. But for the first time, that didn't scare me. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered. Microphones. Cameras, murmurs of, "Do you have a comment?" and "Is justice served?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I walked right past them. Right past Greg, too. His face pale, lips tight, eyes hollow with disbelief. He looked at me like he'd just seen a ghost. And maybe he had. Because the woman he tried to bury was standing in the light, alive and whole. And she didn't see him anymore. That weekend, I went back to the sea, the same tide pool where I'd buried my wedding ring. It was low tide again, the rocks glistening with brine, seaweed curling like ribboned hair. I sat on a bench overlooking the shore, the green coat, wrapped around me like a promise. I opened my old journal one last time, the one I'd started at 16. Pages of girlhood, womanhood, brokenness, and resurrection. I flipped to the last page, and I wrote, "You can bury a woman, but you can't kill her fire." Then I closed the book, left it on the bench. A gift, maybe, or a monument. I didn't take a photo that day. I didn't need to. Some moments don't need proof. They live in the marrow. As I walked back along the shoreline, the wind kissed my face, and the gulls cried above me like echoes of a new life. I wasn't broken. I was molting. The end.